Thanks for coming to the show. Let me see if we're live. Making sure, man. I get up early for y'all. See, it's not even daylight outside yet. Now I'm kind of distracted because I have my. I hope y'all hear me. Let me make sure that you can hear me. Be, because I'm listening to CNN, but I have to mute it on this end because they still playing a lot of stuff, and I don't know when Julia Chatterley is going to be live. I'm talking. There we go. There we go. So I know Julia Chatterley comes on at 9 Eastern or whatever. So that's 6 o'clock Pacific. But maybe she got like a 4 hour shift, 2 hour shift, 8 hour shift. I don't know when she'll be um, uh, going to be activating the interview with Brad Garlinghouse. Please like and subscribe and leave your comments below. So, good morning, everyone. Let me send a tweet. So, there's the tweet. Who's in the house? Let's do roll call. Roll call, everyone. Let me see. Select community. Post. Sorry, this. What? I don't know how to post on Reddit. I'm trying to. All right, let me. So price is at 27 cents. So we had a little dip. Uh oh, got some double here. Chat box. All right, there we go. So let's see my screen. Let's see what BTC is right quick. Is at 9,500. All right. So let's there we go. So I do not know where we at right now. So Julia Chatterley should be coming on in like 4 minutes. So then we'll know what is going on. Good morning, everyone. Hope all is well. Ooh. Hey, good morning. Oh, no. Google thought I was telling it good morning. There volume? Okay, hold on. Let me do the volume. Well, I'll turn that up just in case if I need to turn that up later. But let me turn this one up, my mic. Is that better? Now, let me,
hard to see what's possible.
The commercial. So, put that back on mute. How is everything now? So, I don't know when the interview is going to start, but we can talk. And, oh, well, I could just turn it down. Just turn it down low on my end. All right. Okay, now the volume is nice. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the XRP agent. Thank you for coming to another episode. And today I have, I'm on CNN International at 6 o'clock. Julia Chatterley will start work, and I don't know if soon after that she's gonna start interviewing Brad Garlinghouse, but hopefully she'll do a rundown on whatever she's gonna be talking to today. Let me see how many people we have in the stream. We have 26 people. Hey, if you're not liked and subscribed, like and subscribe. And since I have 26 people, let's start the intro. Welcome back, everybody. Now, as you can see, I have CNN International on, so I don't know exactly when we're going to have Brad Garlinghouse interview. Please hit your like and comments. Please share. I know a lot of people are excited about this interview. The market has dipped to... fiat leak is down. Uh-oh.
Challenge companies reopening, but restrictions remain. Facing up to regulation, Mark Zuckerberg says more is needed and governments must set the rules. And GM in reverse, the car giant winding down Aussie brand Holden. It's Monday. Let's make a move.
I don't want to play that music. It might be have copyright issues.
And once again to all our first movers around the globe, great to have you with us here in the United States. Stock markets are shut for the President's Day holiday, but who needs Wall Street today anyway? There's plenty of action elsewhere. Let me talk you through it, including some pretty big moves in Asia. Chinese stocks, in fact, as you can see, the Shanghai Composite, they're jumping over 2.2%. This as the central bank took fresh measures to support the economy. The People's Bank of China lowering a key lending rate and pumping more cash into the financial system to help lower borrowing costs. Another round of tax cuts may also be on the cards. Now, with today's gains, Chinese stocks have recaptured most of the ground lost since the start of the coronavirus outbreak, a demonstration of the power of central bankers here to steady and shore up confidence in markets. That move, the stimulus move, helped Europe too. Gains from the automakers there, specifically with Chinese exposure, helped push markets to record highs earlier on in the session. But I have to say the economic fallout continues. Firstly, export-driven Singapore cutting its 2020 growth target today to include the possible risk of recession. In Japan, too, stocks fell there amid recessionary fears. The economy contracting over 6% year-on-year in the fourth quarter, the biggest drop in some 5 years. All of this there before the coronavirus hit the region. Consumer spending falling at an 11% annual rate after the big rise in consumption taxes kicked in there too. So challenges all around the region. Let's get to the drivers and the latest on the coronavirus. 2 charter planes carrying more than 300 Americans from a quarantined cruise ship in Japan have arrived in the United States. Among them, 14 people had already tested positive for the virus. They were permitted to board the planes in a special isolation chamber. Worldwide now, at least 1,700 people have died from coronavirus so far. In Shanghai, meanwhile, there's a push to get back to work as stringent health checks become part of day-to-day life. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund says coordinated economic action may be needed to mitigate the financial and economic fallout from the coronavirus. John Defteris has been talking to the IMF's managing director and joins me now. Coordinated or at least synchronized. John, talk us through that discussion, because there's clear concerns about the broader economic fallout here from the IMF.
Yeah, I like the word you used there, Julia, synchronized. I think it was a dual message from the IMF managing director right now, saying we need to be ready to leap into action on monetary policy, although there's a lot of rate cutting in 2019. So you have to question how many tools are still left in that toolbox overall, but also not to take unilateral action when it comes to trade. I think that was a message for U.S. President Donald Trump, although she did understand the fact that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, needs to be basically modernized. And she said, indeed, it has to include e-commerce in that calculation. But I asked her straightforward on stage here at the Global Women's Forum, could China lose 1% of its GDP this year with the estimate from the IMF of 6%? Here's her answer.
We don't yet quite know what is the nature of this virus. We don't know how quickly China would be able to contain it. We don't know whether it would spread to the rest of the world. What we do know, however, is that, yes, indeed, it is going to affect global value chains, already affecting some. It is affecting tourism. It is affecting travel. What we also know that if it is contained rapidly, there can be a sharp drop and then a very rapid rebound, what is known as a V curve. And we are very much hoping this is going to be the case.
And what's the saying, Julia? Hope springs eternal here. I think that's what the IMF managing director is suggesting. And the benchmark for SARS was a drop of 2% and then the V-shaped recovery. But the economy, Madame Georgieva was suggesting to me, is very different. It was 8% of total GDP in the world, China, back in 2003. It's about a fifth of global GDP. So we're very intertwined. And to circle back to your original question at the top here of the program, she's suggesting that they're going to stick by the estimate for another 10 days of 3.3% global growth, and we could lose 0.1 to 0.2% throughout the year, depending on how fast China recovers.
Yeah, they're clearly thinking about recalibrating here, John. I just want to hone in specifically because the Centre for Disease Control here in the United States said that this virus could be around beyond 2020. So we could be dealing with this challenge for many months, not just a quarter or 2 quarters at this stage. And to your point, that the global economy was already dealing with trade tensions. We've seen specific policies going on in Japan, their consumption tax hike that's already dented their economy quite specifically. It's a challenge, not just in the region, but beyond.
Well, of course, and Japan's the 3rd largest economy in the world, and China's number 2. So you can see the scenario you're painting here for us. They had a huge typhoon in 2019, as you suggested, the consumption tax. And let's say the coronavirus could be the X factor for Japan in 2020, because those numbers don't factor in what we're seeing here in the first quarter and why there are concerns they could slip into a recession. There's also that tourism that the IMF managing director was talking about from China. We had 8 million visitors in 2018, up nearly 15% in that year going to Japan. So they have strained government relations going back historically. But the Chinese love Japan and they love to spend money. Their spending was up almost a third in 2018. So this is one of those X factors that could play out for Japan in 2020 indeed. And going back to what Ms. Georgieva told me on stage at the Global Women's Forum, she was saying, look, we had 49 central banks cut interest rates 71 times in the last year. They did take coordinated action. But you have to wonder, Julia, if this carries on, how much more can you do at this stage to prop up the global economy? I think that is the biggest concern. She wasn't alarmist about the growth. She was confident they could come back in the second quarter, but there's clearly a ripple effect.
It's such a great point. 2/3 of the world's central banks already stimulating. What more can they do here to support the global economy? Yeah, it's a great point. John Defterios, thank you so much for that. All right, let's get to David Carver now, who's in Shanghai. David, great to...
I put it on mute. They might lead that into, in a few minutes, the Brad Garlinghouse interview. I do not know when they're going to do the Brad Garlinghouse interview, but we will see. If somebody has an exact time, let me know.
That's right, Julie. I heard you and John there talking about this desire to recover and to come back online. But it's a struggle here, and you start to realize that just walking the streets. I mean, even today, in the middle of what would normally be the lunchtime rush in the heart of the financial area, it was empty. I mean, the traffic circle had maybe 1 or 2 cars going around every 30 seconds or so, and there weren't many people walking around either. I mean, it just seemed that though this area is so subdued compared to where it's supposed to be right now, and this is supposed to be the week where really Chinese are supposed to be coming back into the cities and start working again. That, according to the government. The government has said that 160 million will be traveling in this post-Lunar New Year, what was an extended Lunar New Year, so as to not keep people congregating together, to keep them away from the mass congregation and traveling. But instead, we're seeing that it's just slow as businesses are trying to come online. Julia, you walk into a shop here, and you're oftentimes the only customer if that shop's open, and the employees are just desperate to want to interact with you.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, to know what's best, particularly under these kind of quarantine arrangements. David, we were talking on the show last week about drone use to try and disinfect.
Okay, so I'm gonna mute that. So, all right, so D. Strew, hope I'm pronouncing that right, is saying that the Brad Garlinghouse interview is at 9:30. So Julia Chatterley starts at 9 Eastern Standard Time, I believe, and so we got like about 20 minutes out, I'm guessing. So everybody, welcome CKJ. Woohoo! Perfect 20 minutes. We have gonna hit 1,000 stream. Smash those likes and subscribe. Well, I hope so. Man. Whoa, 93 people in the stream, 10 likes. Well, hey, I'm just amazed that you're on my stream. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So right now the market, XRP is at 27 cents. BTC, where is BTC at right now? Just so y'all have a little update. Is at 9,583. Ethereum is at 245, and XRP is 27 cents, down 10% in the last 24 hours. So I'm trying to find my legs. I'm trying to do all right. If anybody can send me a Twitter DM and show me how to post in Reddit. I just signed up for Reddit, the XRP agent, so I don't know what's how to post in that. But hey, we have 88 people. Hey, what happened to 90? So CKJ News, man, what's up, my brother? Okay. All right, we don't have to talk about the market. Okay. Yeah. Like and subscribe, everybody. So, let's hear what they have to say about
the single market. What they want to hear from him is where he thinks this regulation will go, and also how strongly he'll stick to the rules that they are likely to impose later on in this year. All of this comes just a couple of days before the EU is set to announce a white paper of future legislation governing not just Facebook, but the whole of the internet landscape. And Facebook's large presence on that landscape is significant. I spoke to Vera Jourova, who essentially is, for want of a better word, the privacy czar here across the EU, and she said that the issue Mark Zuckerberg has to understand is that for the EU, this goes way beyond commercial considerations.
I am sure that the business model Facebook uses for selling goods cannot be used for selling the political ideas or political actors. That's why I also want to speak about the protection of elections. I want to protect European voters against the mechanisms of algorithms which just chase them into the bubble and do not give them the free possibility to make a free choice.
Well, the EU has always inherently been very, very nervous about privacy of its data of its citizens. It introduced a year or so ago stringent privacy laws that Facebook at one point thought might lead to a curtailment of the number of daily active users across this region. That hasn't really happened, actually, Julia, in matter of fact. Now the EU is taking on, as you just heard from Vera Jourova there, this issue of how to balance free speech against the responsibility of some of these platforms to eradicate hate speech and also disinformation, both in the public health sphere and also in politics as well. But this is a conversation that Facebook and the EU, both sides know they have to get right. If you take a look at the numbers, you get an idea of what's at stake for each of them. The EU has just under 450 million citizens. According to Facebook's end-of-year figures, at the end of last year, 307 of those 450 million were daily active users of Facebook. You can't just pull the plug on a service like that, as vital as it is across this region, but you can impose things like fines and punitive sanctions. Vera Jourova said that sanctions, if Facebook doesn't comply to new EU rules when eventually they're ruled out, could well be on the table. The question is, who will implement them? Will they be fines for antitrust or something else completely new? That's what we're looking at later on in the week. Julia?
Yeah, the scale of the task isn't justification enough not to do something here. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Nina Dos Santos in Brussels, thank you so much for that. All right, let's move on and let me bring you up to speed with some of the other stories making headlines around the world. Great Britain is beginning to recover from the fierce wind damage and rain.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for participating into the stream. Supposedly, in about 15 minutes, the interview with Brad Garlinghouse will take effect. So hopefully I won't have no issues with the stream. But hey, I see close to 90 people in the stream. Thank you for participating. Please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And I'm excited. The price is at 27 cents. And if he says something good, it could launch us to the moon. All right, everyone. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just documenting my journey. All right, everyone.
One of President Trump's most loyal supporters. Right, we're going to take a quick break here on First Move. But coming up, emerging markets beware how the coronavirus is affecting commodity prices and what that means for economies in Western Africa. And the end of the road for an iconic Australian brand. Carmaker Holden bound for the scrapyard as GM cuts its losses. Stay with CNN, more to come.
We made USAA insurance for busy veterans.
Hey, everyone. This is the XRP agent. Why is she not saying, hey, to come, Brad Garlinghouse interview? So we'll see it eventually. Let me go into the stream and see what's in the stream. I got this going in my ear so I can make sure I don't miss anything. So we have 112 people in the stream. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. please, different people that know me, please like and share. And the people that's new to the stream, I'm the XRP agent. I do videos every day, every other day. I mainly live stream the market so to document the journey when XRP blows up to the moon. All right, so let me see. Tyson, hey, welcome to the stream, good sir. Holding is dead. CKJ is in the house, Brad. Gonna drop some massive breadcrumbs. Okay. All right. Now, if I mute, like if they start playing music during the stream and stuff, if I mute that, I have to do that for copyright issues. So I don't think the stream is messing up. Jeff is in the house. Tyson is in the house. D. Bixer is in the house. Hello, everybody. Shout out to S200 Ray. Excuse me. He's in the house. So we have a lot of people in the house, and trying to keep up with these these messages is quite a chore. 1984. I'm watching from Germany. Ooh. Like and subscribe, good sir. We have 125 people. Wow. So we have about 11 minutes until the Brad Garlinghouse interview. Hey Carl, how you doing? Whoa. Let's see where we at right now. So live stream. There we go. How that?
Across Europe and parts of Asia today, as the Chinese central bank announced fresh stimulus measures, European stocks have touched all-time highs, in fact. And as I mentioned earlier, Chinese stocks rallying over 2.2%. In the meantime, new data shows investors dipping their toes into emerging market stocks. Lipper says more than $700 million flowed into EM funds over the past week. The coronavirus outbreak has restricted the flow of trade and manufacturing across global economies. Among those worst hit, commodity exporting countries in Africa. Take a look at the damage in commodity prices so far this year. We've got oil, energy down some 13% year to date, iron ore down 5%, copper down 6%, nickel down 7% too. John Ashbourne joins us now. He's the senior emerging markets economist at Capital Economics. John, fantastic to have you with us. I want to hone in on West Africa specifically here, because we're not talking tourism, we're not talking supply chain impact. We're simply talking that these are major exporters of commodities to the Chinese economy, and as a result of what we're seeing right now and the restrictions, they're suffering.
They really are. So the most obvious countries to be affected by this outbreak are, of course, countries nearby to China, places with supply chain links, Vietnam, Thailand, of course, Japan. But in very distant places where there are no cases anywhere nearby even, we're still seeing an effect. So West Africa, within Africa, is the worst affected. In Congo-Brazzaville, in Angola, these are countries whose economy is very much geared to providing oil or in some cases iron to the Chinese economy. And when that demand dries up, their economy really does face a serious blow.
I mean, you're talking as well, the Republic of Congo, 50% of their GDP is exports to China.
Yes, it's absolutely massive. You don't see that anywhere else in the world, really. And in the Congolese example, I mean, they're still shipping oil, but they're now having to redirect that to new buyers. I mean, demand in China is going to be down for oil about 10%, at least in this quarter compared to the same time last year, and that's assuming that things get better, which isn't guaranteed. So it's a really big shift, a really big disruption to the West African oil trade, and that oil has to find a new buyer, and that will be tough for some of these countries.
I mean, we've already seen shipments from Angola being sold at a discount. Do you have any sense of what kind of discount this energy and these oil cargo is being sold at? Because that will give us at least a sense of the damage that's being done in terms of the income for these companies?
It would. I mean, sadly, it's a bit of an opaque market at times, but it's worth remembering that there's two effects here. One is the disruption of particular oil cargoes, which are having to find a new buyer. But even when that isn't the case, just the price of oil globally is down pretty substantially. So that's a pretty big hit. I mean, in Nigeria, a fall in oil prices of about $10 a barrel, that cuts their exports by $500 million a month. So, even in places where the oil wasn't going to China, they're still accepting lower prices for it, and that's going to be painful across the region.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier on the show about the possibility of a V-shaped recovery here. If you've already sold the goods at a discount, you're not recovering that, even if the business and the market sort of kicks back in the second quarter or later than that. How damaging is this, John? What are the repercussions, whether it's on cost of borrowing, quite frankly, or debt repayments? How critical and for who, even in the short term?
Well, I think in the short term, you are looking mostly at smaller producers. So Congo comes up all the time, South Sudan, potentially places where they don't have a lot of breathing space to roll over the payments they have to make. They need the oil to go out. And as you say, even if things bounce back, which of course, God's willing they will, even if they bounce back in March, they will have lost revenue during this period of time. And we're actually, to be fair, at Capital Economics, and I think a lot of other places, quite optimistic about oil prices rising back to maybe $70, $75 a barrel at the end of this year. The fundamentals should be there for that. But there will be a big loss potential for commodity producers because they just face capacity constraints. They can't produce a lot more oil later in the year to make up this value. Whereas in other cases, in China itself, for instance, it's very possible that you end up with disruptions that are made back in later months. So it will be painful, particularly for the smaller producers.
It's interesting your point about a pickup in oil prices here. What are your expectations about OPEC or OPEC Plus coming together here, at least in the short term, and doing something perhaps to shore up prices? Does your prediction include that?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, we've already seen actions by OPEC to try and come together. I mean, they are very worried about this, clearly. I mean, the fall in global oil consumption is much more, I think, than most people predicted back in January. I mean, we're seeing a really big change, a quarter-on-quarter fall. We haven't had that since the global financial crisis. So the oil producers very much know that this is serious and they know they need to do something. And that, combined with our belief that the economic impact of this virus is likely to be painful but relatively brief, suggests that oil prices should have quite a bit of support. That isn't the case for all commodities, but at least for oil, I think the end of this year should make up a lot of the losses.
Yeah, lots of repercussions here and a ripple effect. John, great to have you with us. John Ashbourne, the Senior Emerging Market Economist at Capital Economics. All right, let me bring you up to speed with today's boardroom brief. Train manufacturing giant Alstom says it's in talks to buy the passenger train arm of Canada's Bombardier. The deal could be worth $7 billion. Alstom, based in France, proposed merging last year with the rail business of German giant Siemens, but European regulators ruled against it. Oyo Hotels and Homes, the Indian-based hotel chain backed by SoftBank, has reported a six-fold increase in losses. A costly expansion into China saw the annual loss grow from around $50 million to more than $330 million. Just weeks ago, Oyo laid off around 2,000 employees. And coming up on the show, winning over the regulators, we speak to the CEO who's eager to educate governments around the world on the virtues of digital coins and cryptocurrencies. Stay with us. We're back after this.
You hear that? It's coming. Yeah, so so in 4 minutes they're gonna be interviewing Brad Garlinghouse. Woohoo! I hope so. So I'm excited. Are you excited? So hopefully they'll have the whole interview on there. Now the alert box, I'm gonna just let me see. I'm gonna just make that unavailable because I don't want anything to pop up during the interview. So we have 4 minutes until the Brad Garlinghouse interview. Hopefully you have some good information. All right, everyone. So now I'm excited. How many people we have in the stream? Whoa, I'm blown away. This is the most I had in my stream. 220 people. Please hit those likes and subscribe to the channel. All right. We have about 2 minutes for the stream. I'm going to switch over so that way we'll have everything set up. No distractions. Exactly. Because as you can tell, the sun is just coming up in California. So, Digital Asset News. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you. All right. So I think we're coming up. Okay, one more commercial. So I'm not going to be looking at the blow this up. I'm not going to be looking at the I'm not going to be looking at the chat in the interview. Let me see. Maybe pull it up on this one. All right, is this it? All right. I'm going to put myself on mute.
Ripple is a company that utilizes blockchain technology to build an alternative global payment system. Those global payments are facilitated by the cryptocurrency XRP. The firm just raised $200 million from investors in a share sale, valuing the company now at a cool $10 billion. The company also hinting about going public in the near future. I spoke to the Ripple CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, who told me why 2020 is an important year for the industry and also their company.
I think one of the reasons why 2020 will be very important is that regulatorily, that's a word, the clarity is getting better. And I mean that globally. Countries like Singapore and Thailand and Switzerland and Japan. I think the U.S. has still an opportunity to do more there, but I think we will probably see that in 2020, and I think that helps catapult the whole industry. I also think you've gone from an industry that has been a little bit in the shadows and the history of crypto.
Very much in the shadows.
Yeah, I remember actually, you and I were both at Davos, and someone early on in my arrival there, someone was like, crypto's still a bad word here. I was like,
it's a misunderstood word.
It is, and I think a lot of what I'm doing and a lot of what I did in Davos is meeting with regulators, meeting with very senior people at banks and explaining to them how crypto can be used, how specifically XRP can be used to solve a real problem. Not to circumvent regulation, not to circumvent any government. And I think once people understand that, they very quickly become disarmed. It's no longer a bad word.
So I was in Southeast Asia, and the growth in digitization, in payments, particularly for the proportion of the unbanked population, is so huge.
Yeah.
And I do feel like the regulators there are all stepping up. China is another example with, they're even talking about, a yuan digital coin here.
Right.
Who's leading?
Well, it depends a little bit how we talk about leading. China, to your point, it's been fascinating to see. They really, through mining power, control the Bitcoin blockchain. You have 4 miners in China that represent something like 60+% of mining capacity, and 80% of mining capacity is based in China for both Bitcoin and Ether. So in many ways, I think China's been incredibly strategic about how they think about that.
Yes.
And I look at the U.S. and I say, hey, U.S., here we are in downtown New York. We could and should, I think, do more for that clarity to allow for more investment. But you see, I think, a lot of countries around the world seeing that this is a technical wave, this is a major step, and they want to invest in it. They want to see companies continue to invest, and I think that's good for the economy.
Do you think we see, at some point in the near future, a Chinese digital coin, a Fed coin?
When I step back and I think about it macro, I think it's really healthy and constructive for the entire crypto blockchain community to see central banks and central governments lean into what can these new technologies do to make our economy more efficient, our payment infrastructure more efficient, any transaction more efficient. So at large, I think it's really positive. Mnuchin was asked about this in Davos, and he made a point which I think has some validity, which is the Fed window in the United States. If a bank goes to the Fed window, they're not getting a crate of dollars, paper dollars. They're getting a digitized, centralized ledger entry. And so it's kind of like, well, what's the difference between if the central bank issues a centralized token versus what they do today? Like, how different is that? Now, there's some governments around the world that might, you could argue, say, well, a central bank could go direct to consumers and you could have an account with the central bank. I don't think in most of the Europe, US, you're going to circumvent the commercial banks. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
But what about you, for Ripple, building a platform that could perhaps substitute XRP for a Fed coin one day, or some other...
The XRP ledger as an open source technology, we think about how do we make it really useful for the customers we work with. We also think about how do we make it extensible and how do we participate in that open source community in a way that makes it extensible to other types of customers. But could central banks? Sure, they could use aspects of that.
Could it be more efficient, what they create one day?
Yeah, and that ultimately is the underpinning I think we all focus on. How can we make this more efficient for our customers? And right now, the customers we focus on are commercial banks, payment providers. We certainly are thinking about other types of customers we could serve. I mean, I have made the point, I don't know if I've ever said it on air, but I've made the point that in the earliest days of Amazon, it's called Amazon Books. It was a bookseller. It competed with Barnes & Noble, competed with Borders, and when I think about Ripple today is viewed as a cross-border payments company. We view ourselves as a blockchain infrastructure company. The first vertical we've done is cross-border payments. We want to make sure we're winning in cross-border payments before we do another vertical, but we will certainly do other verticals leveraging these technologies.
You said you're an investor in Bitcoin. You own Bitcoin.
I am. I do own Bitcoin, yes.
Yeah. So XRP, is that a good investment?
I have said very publicly, I think the value of any digital asset in the long term will be derived from the utility it delivers. Bitcoin utility increasingly, I think, is just viewed as it's digital gold. The gold market is a multi-trillion-dollar market, and Bitcoin today is, I think, around $150 billion, $160 billion.
Yes.
Do I think there's an opportunity for Bitcoin to appreciate as more people see it as a useful store of value? Yeah, I think so. Do I think there's going to be other digital assets that increasingly have utility for customers and therefore drive velocity, usage, people holding it, it drives demand? Yes, I think that's likely.
Will the utility value of XRP always outweigh the store of value reason for holding it, in your mind?
No, I mean, I think store of value is a dynamic in part. People want to hold assets that are highly liquid.
You called it digital gold, though. Bitcoin digital gold.
Yeah,
does XRP have that potential?
I think as XRP has utility through what Ripple is doing and with other people using XRP, and there's a bunch of other companies doing very cool stuff. I mean, a very innovative company called Coil doing interesting micropayments, particularly focused on media, very fascinating. Yes. And so when I look at XRP, I look at the whole. I look at what Ripple's doing, I look at what Coil's doing, I look at what Forte's doing as a gaming company using XRP. I look at the holistic. If there's a lot of utility and people see value in that utility, then I don't worry about it. I often have said, look, I don't think about the price of XRP on 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months. Over the coming years, I think that we, Ripple, are focused on driving utility from this asset, and if we're successful with that, we think that's good for the liquidity of the whole ecosystem.
Talk to me about the raising of money and the $10 billion valuation. How do you feel about that?
I think anytime you have new investors come in, you are intimidated by the expectations that are set. By the same token, Ripple today at today's XRP price owns something like 15 plus billions, I think somewhere north of $15 billion of the crypto. So in some ways, those investors came in at a discount. Look, we are in a very fortunate position to have a very strong balance sheet. We're in a very fortunate position to have a lot of customer momentum. And I think it's because we've focused on solving a real problem for real customers.
So why IPO? Why go public, to your point? If you have this money, you're raising money. What's the purpose of going public?
Well, I don't think we've said we're going to go public. I think what we've said, what I said was, I think 2020 will likely have crypto kind of blockchain IPOs. And I think what I said was, I don't think Ripple will be the first, but we certainly don't want to be the last. So I kind of kept it open-ended. I think people heard something a little bit different than that. But look, the balance sheet flexibility we have had has given us the ability to invest over $500 million across the blockchain ecosystem. That includes, within XRP world, but also beyond that, because again, back to, I think all boats can rise. So I think having balance sheet flexibility gives us strength to do new things. The MoneyGram deal is a deal I know you're very familiar with, where we invested about $50 million into MoneyGram. And so we want to continue to have the flexibility to grow the business. We have added more than 150 employees last year. At a time when I think others who have been less focused on solving real problems, there's been a bunch of layoffs in the crypto community over the past, even few weeks. And, we're going to continue to grow. We want to make sure we have the balance sheet flexibility to do that.
Fast forward 5 years, where are you?
Well, I think the overall crypto community will continue to grow at really impressive rates. In 5 years from now, I don't know exactly how to think about that, but I think within crypto world, I think Ripple will continue to grow and take market share. But that will probably be, we're focused on cross-border payments today. I think we'll look at other use cases, as I kind of alluded earlier. And I hope that in 5 years we've got we're not just Amazon Books, but we are Amazon.
Bold call. The whole discussion is on social media. I've tweeted it out if you want to watch more of that. Brad Garlinghouse there, the Ripple CEO. All right, after the break, it started life as a...
Hello, everyone. Man, that was a pretty good interview. It's not as much as I would want, far as news and stuff. Let me just kill this in the background. Oh, wow. I could finally hear stuff. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining in. I saw one comment saying that he never pumps up XRP. Well, he really can't, because you have to have a distance between the company and the digital asset, because if he's pumping it up and they still own the majority of it, it's like they're pumping up their stocks, and there's issues with that. I don't know about the laws and regulations and all that good stuff, but yeah, you don't want to do that. So yeah, and for the 4 people that thumbs down my video, hey, thank you. Hey, God bless y'all. But hey, everything is gonna work itself out in the future. So all right, let me check some of these comments. And thanks everybody for participating. Let me see. Let me put back XRP fiat leak. Just a second. There we go. See where the market is. Alright, it's still at 27 cents. Now with Julia, she said she put some parts of the video on social media, so let's look out for that, and we shall see. All right, let me go back over here. Ooh, 250 people still on the stream. Thank you. So, Crypto Peru. Let me give a shout out to Crypto Peru. Thank you. All right. Chat box. Let me see. There we go. Why I always have to add another chat box for it to populate? There we go. So I know a lot of people that does deep dives more than I do is going to be tearing apart that interview and showing some good what's that called, some good nuggets out of that interview, and also too she's probably going to be tweeting out some good information as well. Brad Kimes, I want to give a special shout out to Brad Kimes. He did a tweet, follow the XRP agent. I really appreciate that. We have a new subscriber. I can't even pronounce that. Thank you for being in the stream. Please like and subscribe. Let me see. Oh, the mid alert box. Follow mid. Yeah, let's turn that one on. There we go. All right, everyone. This is the XRP agent. Let me see. Should I stay on? Even though I got a lot of people on here. I really appreciate your participation. Let me see. Live stream. Yeah, so I have like 190 people on the stream. Thank you. Maybe you'll check out the Twitter notifications and see what's in Twitter. See what's in the news for today. All right. Now, if y'all got some Spanish Fly, Peru Crypto. Hey, Spanish Fly, Peru Crypto. Who else is in the house? CKJ. He should have said MoneyGram Q1 earnings call will blow you away. Yup. Definitely. Let me all right. So all right, so let me put it's a new tweet from Julia. So let me pull that up. Let's listen. Uh-oh. Why it froze? Let me redo this.
It's exciting times.
It's been a really exciting time, and I think it's demonstrative of the momentum in the overall industry, but certainly for Ripple, 2019 was an incredible year for us. We started 2020 with a lot of momentum. I think it really goes back to moving from that speculation that has driven the crypto market to utility, like solving problems for customers. And Ripple's been focused on that for a long time, and as that momentum builds, you're seeing more and more customers come on, more and more liquidity, and that's good for everybody in the ecosystem.
Why is 2020 that year, to your point, that pivotal moment where we look at the utility value here, perhaps, and differentiate from the speculative?
I think one of the reasons why 2020 will be very important is that regulatorily, that's a word, the clarity is getting better. And I mean that globally. Countries like Singapore and Thailand and Switzerland and Japan. I think the U.S. has still an opportunity to do more there, but I think we will probably see that in 2020, and I think that helps catapult the whole industry. I also think you've gone from an industry that has been a little bit in the shadows, and the history of crypto.
Very much in the shadows.
Yeah, I remember actually, you and I were both at Davos, and someone early on in my arrival there, someone was like, crypto's still a bad word here. I was like,
it's a misunderstood word.
It is, and I think a lot of what I'm doing, and a lot of what I did in Davos, is meeting with regulators, meeting with very senior people at banks, and explaining to them how crypto can be used, how specifically XRP can be used to solve a real problem, not to circumvent regulation, not to circumvent any government. And I think once people understand that, they very quickly become disarmed. It's no longer a bad word.
Do they understand when you're talking, and you've sort of shifted the focus to on-demand liquidity and these cross-border transactions and facilitating faster, more efficient payments? Can they get a grip with that, perhaps more than the rest of it? Because I think for me that's something that, particularly from my view, is they get and understand.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. And even in Davos, to be able to start to talk about that and put numbers on it. Last week, we did $54 million of XRP flows into Mexico. That's 7.5% of all flow from US dollar to Mexican peso.
You were 7% of the market.
Last week. And that's up from maybe 3% in December. So this is growing very quickly. And look, these are huge industries that can be made massively more efficient by using these new technologies. But I think it goes back to what we said earlier. Like, you have to focus on a real problem, a real customer, and drive that utility. Look, with 7.5% of liquidity into Mexico being driven through XRP, you start to really see, okay, this is not a science experiment. There's still a lot of people, I think, in the blockchain industry who aren't familiar with the fact of how much momentum we have here. You had Alex Holmes, the CEO of MoneyGram, on. Yeah, I think that's an example where it's one of our customers using XRP, and it's working.
I mean, he said, look, I was pushing him to see what proportion of the market you could become of the daily volume, and he was like, look, you need a buyer, you need a seller here, so we're only limited in a sense by the number of people that are simply using the platform and available here. How quickly do you think, given that you're saying you've gone from 3% to 7% in just a couple of months, how quickly can you scale up? Because it's a tipping point of bringing more people onto the platform as well as anything else.
Well, the great thing is, and this is true in the markets and here at the NYSE, liquidity begets liquidity.
Yes.
The more activity you see and the more people see, and frankly, it was great. Even the CEO of Bitso, the largest digital asset exchange in Mexico, has been out publicly talking about some of the dynamics he's seen. And instead of being dependent upon the speculative trading of crypto as his business, he now can say, look, I have institutional flows represent, last week, just one customer through Ripple is $54 million. That's fabulous for him. On a run rate, that's $2.5 billion flowing through what we call on-demand liquidity, or ODL. That's a big deal for his business, and that brings other players that want to say, well, wait a minute, that's good. I want to be a part of that.
How do you prioritize building that liquidity and your presence there versus saying, okay, now we're going to look for another corridor, another currency pair here, another country? How do you prioritize that, and what brings more customers potentially on board quicker?
Well, so I'll dodge the question a little bit by saying it's the and versus the or, meaning we definitely are prioritizing new corridors. We've talked publicly about the fact we're in Mexican peso, Philippine peso, and Australian dollar. We've started to talk about some of what we're seeing in Brazil, and we'll increasingly talk about other new corridors. I mean, the good news is we have a lot of demand, and so we'll certainly expand other corridors. But that isn't to say we do care about liquidity, using the Mexican peso as an example, and we are seeing liquidity naturally grow there because liquidity begets liquidity. And market makers, whether they're existing traditional market makers or crypto market makers, they see the liquidity and they realize, hey, there's an opportunity there, and so it's growing very well.
We're after Brazil. No dodging.
Well, there's certainly, when we look at a framework of which countries, we want regulatory clarity.
And that's key.
And that's an important one. Yeah. So there are markets, any remittance market that has a lot of US dollar, euro remittances into other countries, that's a high priority. But if you don't have regulatory clarity, that's a challenge in those markets. Typically you'd say India would be high on our list. India hasn't yet provided a lot of clarity from a regulatory point of view, and so we have not prioritized.
And that's key. You step back until you have that regulatory clarity, because you don't waste the time. Almost.
I wouldn't say we step back. We engage. It means a lot of frequent flyer miles for me.
Okay, so you're engaging with India.
For sure. And but back to what we said about Davos, it's sitting down with key regulators and explaining to them, this is not circumventing a KYC, know your customer check. It's not circumventing anti-money laundering checks. It's not. Once regulators understand you're not circumventing regulatory frameworks, they get very comfortable very quickly, and they lean in because they understand this is actually helping inclusion in the financial system. The people who are most burdened by remittance costs are those that can least afford it, and that's I think we all should care.
Wow, that was great. Let me, she has another one. Julia Chatterley, let me, that one, and let me, that one has some good information in it. All right, let me pull this back up. All right, let me.
Who's most open to this? Because I was in Southeast Asia, and the growth in digitization, in payments, particularly for the proportion of the unbanked population, is so huge.
Yeah.
And I do feel like the regulators there are all stepping up. China is another example with, they're even talking about, a yuan digital coin here.
Right.
Who's leading?
Well, it depends a little bit how we talk about leading. I mean, China, to your point, it's been fascinating to see it. I mean, they really, through mining power, control the Bitcoin blockchain. You have 4 miners in China that represent something like 60+% of mining capacity, and 80% of mining capacity is based in China for both Bitcoin and Ether. So in many ways, I think China's been incredibly strategic about how they think about that.
Yes.
And I look at the U.S. and I say, hey, U.S., here we are in downtown New York. We could and should, I think, do more for that clarity to allow for more investment. But you see, I think, a lot of countries around the world seeing that this is a technical wave, this is a major step, and they want to invest in it. They want to see companies continue to invest, and I think that's good for the economy.
Do you think we see, at some point in the near future, a Chinese digital coin, a Fed coin? Because the conversations are being had. Everyone's looking at this and trying to understand what it would mean for them to not be in the game here. And I know we can have the conversation about decentralized versus centralized and what it would mean even to have a central bank digital coin.
The word central bank.
I know, we're struggling here. However.
Look, when I step back and I think about it macro, I think it's really healthy and constructive for the entire crypto blockchain community to see central banks and central governments lean into what can these new technologies do to make our economy more efficient, our payment infrastructure more efficient, any transaction more efficient. So at large, I think it's really positive. Mnuchin was asked about this in Davos, and he made a point which I think has some validity, which is the Fed window in the United States. If a bank goes to the Fed window, they're not getting a crate of dollars, paper dollars. They're getting a digitized, centralized ledger entry. And so there's kind of like, well, what's the difference between if the central bank issues a centralized token versus what they do today? Like, how different is that? Now, there's some governments around the world that might, you could argue, say, well, a central bank could go direct to consumers and you could have an account with the central bank. I don't think in most of the Europe, US, you're going to circumvent the commercial banks. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
But what about you, for Ripple, building a platform that could perhaps substitute XRP for a Fed coin one day, or
we think
some
about
other...
The XRP ledger as an open source technology, we think about how do we make it really useful for the customers we work with. We also think about how do we make it extensible and how do we participate in that open source community in a way that makes it extensible to other types of customers. But could central banks, sure, they could use aspects of that.
Could it be more efficient, what they create one day?
Yeah, and that ultimately is the underpinning I think we all focus on. How can we make this more efficient for our customers? And right now the customers we focus on are commercial banks, payment providers. We certainly are thinking about other types of customers we could serve. I mean, I have made the point, I don't know if I've ever said it on air, but I've made the point that in the earliest days of Amazon, it's called Amazon Books. It was a bookseller. It competed with Barnes & Noble, competed with Borders, and when I think about Ripple today is viewed as a cross-border payments company. We view ourselves as a blockchain infrastructure company. The first vertical we've done is cross-border payments. We want to make sure we're winning in cross-border payments before we do another vertical, but we will certainly do other verticals leveraging these technologies.
So you're open, potentially in the future at some point, to using the Fed coin? Or the one coin. I'm pushing because the head of blockchain technology at JP Morgan told me if the Fed came up with a coin, they dumped JP Morgan coin. So I'm asking you whether you're open to the possibility of...
Sure. I mean, I think I'm very open. Even if the Fed in the United States is using a coin, you still have a cross-border settlement dynamic where if you have central banks around the world using their own digital asset, I don't think it changes the need for a cross-border neutral
Something
settlement.
in the middle, like an XRP.
And XRP has been extremely efficient. I mean, look, we obviously have a vested interest in that, and we're not bashful about that, but XRP is extremely efficient from a technical point of view in terms of speed, in terms of scalability, in terms of cost, where I'm a Bitcoin holder, but it's not going to solve a payments problem when the transaction time and transaction cost is, almost 1,000x what it is for XRP.
What's going on with the price of XRP, and why did Mike Novogratz weigh in on this and suggest it was going to be another bad year in 2020?
I think the short answer is I think Mike doesn't fully follow Ripple very closely. There's a lot of things he wasn't aware of some of the stuff we're doing with MoneyGram. I think he if he watches this, he'll be surprised to hear that we had $54 million of ODL flows last week. Look, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of misinformation in this market, and I think it's important to make sure that the industry is educated. And it's the reason why I try to get out and make sure that we're sharing what really is going on with real customers, solving real problems.
All right, everybody. I think that's it. I think she only had like a two-parter. So, did you like it? I hope so. Yeah. So. All right. Let me see. Hold on real quick. Always have to do that. Add another chat box to the stream so my chat box can be auto-populated. All right, everyone.
Most open to this, because I was in Southeast Asia.
So we have 137 in the stream. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is the XRP agent showing you the interview with Julia Chatterley, if I'm pronouncing that right, with Brad Garlinghouse. I hope you like it. Please like and subscribe. Please turn up your microphone. Well, my microphone is up, but it was Twitter that was real low. So I know my microphone is pretty good. So let me know if my microphone is good. All right, everyone. I'm gonna end the stream here and then start the daytime market watch. All right. This is the XRP agent. I love hearing your comments. Leave them below. Let everyone know that, hey, the XRP agent is trying to do a good job. Until next time.